Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on realizing the value of consumer insights hosted by inQuba and Cadena Growth Partners. Just to let you know, this session is being recorded and will be kicking off in approximately 2 or 3 minutes. We're just waiting for everyone to join. Thank you. If you've just joined us, a very good morning to you. We'll be kicking off in just about a minute or two. Looking forward to this session on unlocking the value in consumer insight. Thanks for joining us. All right, a very good morning to you all. We're going to get started with the session today. Good morning and welcome to this webinar on realizing the value of consumer insights. We're going to be taking a deeper look into the world of consumer behavior and behavioral economics that really helps to drive tangible business value. This session is jointly hosted by inQuba and Cadena Growth Partners, and the session will be recorded if you'd like to share it at a later stage with any colleagues. To introduce myself, my name is Tim Mitchell. I'm the Digital Transformation and Customer Experience Leader at Cadena Growth Partners, and we're excited to be here with inQuba to really unlock this view of what does it mean to realize the value of consumer insights. And to help set the context, I'd like to share with you Tim's terrifying stats of the day. So many years ago, a Harvard Business School professor called Gerard Zeltman famously stated that 95% of consumer buying behavior is actually subconscious. So it follows then that a more recent market study concluded that companies using behavioral insights actually outperform their peers by 85% in sales growth and more than 25% in gross margin. So the point here is that the mindset of the consumer is critical to purchase decisions, and organizations that are actually tapping into those behavioral insights are significantly outperforming their peers in the market. Now, this becomes increasingly important in this new age of customer expectations being at an all-time high, and the drive towards digitization and artificial intelligence augmentation of the organization that we're talking about is on the rise. So with that in mind, this webinar really seeks to explore how organizations can uplift their customer experience through a deepened understanding of the mechanics behind consumer behavior. And to set the tone for the session, I'd like to get right into it. So I'll call on Trent Rossini. He's the Managing Director of inQuba with over 30 years of experience at the intersection of customer behavior and technology. So I'm looking forward to Trent's content focused on the dynamics of customer behavior in driving actionable customer insights. Thanks, Trent. Over to you.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you to Imka and Keble for joining us this morning. I think it's going to be a fascinating discussion. What I wanted to do is just to give you some background and link some formal models to the kinds of experiences. So in many respects, I'm trying to bring together the experience of one and then to think through how that applies to organizations that are trying to drive customer behavior at scale. So what I want to do is I just want to reflect on a situation. Just to introduce myself, as Tim said, I'm one of the co-founders of inQuba and have been involved in this business for quite some time. And I want to take you back a little bit in time to earlier this year, specifically to 3 o'clock on the 30th of July. Now, you would have seen from my intro picture that I have a particular passion for cycling. And certainly when I'm not involved in customer experience, I quite enjoy the activities of being out enjoying nature. And at the risk of sounding like I'm boasting a bit, my average heart rate is in the region of 49%. Now, why is that relevant to a webinar on customer experience? Well, it turns out on the 30th of July at 3 o'clock, my heart rate went up to 81 beats per minute. And I know this because obviously I do wear a Garmin watch, and that keeps a running track in terms of what's happening, I guess, in my world. So I guess for the audience online, what were the options? Was I fortunate to be out in the forest on the track, enjoying myself cycling? Or was I, in fact, engaged with a financial institution on the line trying to resolve an issue? And as you would have guessed, and given the topic of today's discussion, it was definitely option B. So how is this relevant to how we think about customers and customer experience? Well, let's go back to the customer life cycle. A customer, when engaging with your organization, whether you're a telco, a retailer, an insurance company, typically a customer will go through a cycle of first having awareness, then considering your brand, and then ultimately purchasing. What will then happen is they will evolve from that purchase experience into a service experience. And if, as an organization, you manage to do a really great job, with a bit of luck, you should get some loyalty. And ultimately, if you do a sterling job, what will happen is that you should get some advocacy, which will lead to repeat purchases. And I think, it's a very simplistic view of the world, but a super important one. Now, if we reflect on a consumer, I came across this quote from Maxie Smith from Forrester, and I think it really is golden in terms of capturing how customers are no doubt thinking about your organization. And what she really said, she said, do you know whether your customers feel it's actually worth it to be your customer? And I think it's a great perspective to have. It's not that customers are beholden to you. It is, in fact, that corporate organizations should be beholden to the customer. Now, how this fits together really is in the context of behavioral economics. And there's a tremendous amount of work that's been done. Tim opened up the discussion outlining how organizations that recognize people that are making emotional decisions typically do well. And if we reflect on some of the work done by Daniel Kahneman, he talks about thinking fast for thinking slow, or put differently, how people either make gut-based decisions, or alternatively mind-based or rational decisions. So I originally come from an engineering background. And one of the things that I discovered in getting involved in the world of customer experience management is that decision-making is not quite as rational as an engineer would think. And this was reinforced by a neuro researcher, Antonio Damasio. And he did some really interesting work. He actually studied patients that had a series of brain damage. And specifically, he looked at those individuals that had a problem in the link between the amygdala and the neocortex. So basically the limbic or gut part of your brain and the rational part. And what you discovered is that emotion actually drives decision making, and a lot of the so-called rational decision making, in fact, is rationalization of the decision. So, in spite of thoughts of people like myself, they come from a very scientific point of view that like to think that we're making rational decisions. In fact, turns out we're not. We just we come up with better stories as to how we justify the irrationality, the rationality of our irrational decision. Now, you can take all of these factors and you can put them together in terms of a model. And this is a particularly good one that I came across from Schiffman and Koenig. And I think it gives good perspective on how customers go about buying your products. And ultimately, pretty much everyone on the call today would be thinking about how their organization ultimately can either generate more revenue from new purchases or alternatively retain customers. So the first point to recognize is that there are a series of inputs. Those are influenced by obviously your marketing efforts, so how you promote your product, the price, the channel of distribution, and they reflect very much the social cultural environment. A different context on this is obviously what's happening in the USA elections at the moment. And I think the social cultural element has in many ways surprised many people with an outcome that certainly what was not predicted in the mainstream media. And you'll see the factors that play out here. So family, informal sources, non-commercial sources, social class, culture, and subcultures. And those have been very big factors in the so-called buying decision of a political leader in the US, but they apply in many respects to how people make decisions around products. Then customers get involved along the life cycle that I spoke about earlier, and they start to think about how they're going to reach their goal, often referred to as jobs to be done. And that's really around satisfying the particular need of the customer and how they go about either buying or rebuying a product and looking at alternatives. And in that context, as outlined by some of the researchers I made mention, there's a big psychological field of motivation, perception, personality, attitudes, and experience. And all of those are at play on a continuous basis to determine how people make decisions. And ultimately, you get an output, which is the purchase, and the purchase obviously then gives rise to a financial outcome. And that's obviously, the focus of any commercial business, to make sure that the purchases trend in the right direction, and you get more customers and you get word of mouth. So if you want to do some really great reading on this particular subject, and I think this is an excellent book on behavioral economics and how it can drive marketing and sales and business outcomes. A book that I would strongly recommend is Demand, Creating What People Love Before They Know It, by Adrian Slawotsky. And he talks through a number of case studies, and he reflects on the value that customers perceive. So one of the models that we often use is this notion that customers perceive value through an economic lens, a functional lens. That's basically the set of features that the offering has, the experiential elements. So what's the experience of engaging with the particular brand and product, and ultimately the symbolic or brand element is super important. And good evidence of that obviously is in the likes of Apple and the prominence that brings to bear. So there's quite a lot to actually think about in terms of making sure that value permeates through to the customer to drive this whole notion of magnetism. And magnetism is where functionality and emotion come together. And we really can see that in some of the amazing success stories. The quintessential examples in the global arena being Amazon, being Apple, being Tesla. Closer to home, I think companies like Discovery, Capitec have done an equally good job. Now, as customers are navigating in your organization, through your organization and through your customer journeys, you need to continuously think about what are the feedback mechanisms that you've got available to you. And there are quite a number to think about. The first of those is to look at behavioral analytics. Basically, what are customers doing? This is super important because their behavior is, as we've said, often not conscious and can't always rationalize it, and they certainly can't always articulate it. So seeing what customers are doing is super important. What's equally important is getting some form of rating from them. How are customers perceiving what's going on? Because ultimately what you want to do is you want to bring together behavioral analytics and ratings. And given the constraints of structured feedback, often what you want to do is you want to supplement the structured feedback with unstructured feedback. And with all of the work that's happening in AI, in natural language processing, unstructured text can offer you incredible insights. Voice feedback is also another really valuable source of feedback. So going beyond the actual words and into the tone and processing that. And again, AI is doing an incredible job in terms of being able to bring together another set of data points and link that to the behavioral outcomes. And then obviously that can be complemented with video. I guess the ultimate would be to tie back to the heart rate of customers, but I think it's fair to say, with the exception of certain programs such as Discovery Vitality, corporates at this stage don't have mainstream access to heart rate monitors. And while an interesting case study, hopefully for today's discussion, I don't think we're going to see that in the near future. So I just wanted to give that as a quick background and some context setting for the rest of the discussion as we engage with the panel. Thanks very much, Tim.
Excellent, Trent. Thank you so much for your thoughts and your perspectives on this. One specific quote comes to mind as you're talking through that, and it's a quote that comes from Steve Jobs. Many years ago, he said, "Get closer to your customers, so close that you tell them what they need well before they realize it themselves." And I believe in this age of digitalization, and as we're seeing so much artificial intelligence coming into play as well, the ability for us to get closer to our customers is more important than ever before. And who better to help me dive into this topic of consumer behavior than two experts that I have joining us today. So alongside myself and Trent, we also have Imka. She's the marketing manager for search and AI at Google, as well as Kebo, and she's the general manager for shared value and sustainability at Avbob. And maybe just to kick off our discussions and break the ice a little bit, ladies, perhaps if I could ask you to briefly introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your role, and share a glimpse into how the work that you're doing really has a strong link to consumer behavior in South Africa. Imka, perhaps if we could start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me. Good morning, everybody. I should start with saying that, my commitment to the cause is great enough that I clearly picked my meeting room to match my outfit as well. So that is the level of attention to detail that makes for good customer experience. More broadly, though, my role, as Tim had mentioned, is looking after Google search and our AI products across Africa more broadly. And so within that, understanding the user journey, understanding specifically what you heard earlier, Trent mentioned the jobs to be done, understanding what users actually use our products for and how that fits into their life, how it fits into their information search journey, for example, in this case, is a very important part of how we tell the stories to drive adoption and retention more broadly. So yes, a very key part of my job. Kebo, why don't I hand over to you? I see your background is slightly more neutral, so excellent effort there.
Thanks, Imka. Good day, everyone. Thanks, Tim and Trent, for that context that you've given us for today. So my name is Kebo, and I have the privilege of working with the Avbob team that looks after the shared value and sustainability scope of the business. So under shared value, really, our focus is about, well, maybe to start off with, Avbob is a mutual, and the core purpose of the organization is to create and share value with our members. But obviously, we need to be thinking about our members, but not only within the context of only their lives, but also within the context of the communities that they live in. And that's where the sustainability element comes in. But for the purposes of the discussion today, we'll be focusing more on the shared value aspect in terms of, you know, the role and the importance of our ability to be able to take the value that is created for our FOP members and making sure that we return it to them, because ultimately they are you know, the owners of this business. So we do not have shareholders, we've got members. And our role is really to take whatever value has been generated and share it with our members. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Kebo, and thank you, Imka. I must say I've had the great fortune of collaborating with and working with Imka and Kebo in different shapes and forms over the last couple of years, and really do appreciate the modern take that both of them have as to how we tap into consumer insights and provide a better value proposition in the market. So I'm going to launch right into our discussion, and Imka, I'd like to kick off our discussion with a question for you, just in understanding some of the idle points in the customer journey. So just to set a bit of context, research from Salesforce recently stated that 66% of global customers expect organizations to respond to their unique needs and create engaging points along the customer journey. Yet roughly the same percentage of those customers feel that they're just treated as yet another number. So in your experience, Imka, do you believe that it's the idle points in the journey that make or break the experience, or is it the ability for organizations to better engage with a unique set of needs at different stages of the customer journey?
A good question, thank you. I am not actually convinced that it is the idle points that make or break a customer journey, to tell you the truth, Tim. If you think about it, demand tends to be very much needs-based, right? And so there will be idle points throughout your lifetime that you don't have the demand. So if I have to think about an example here, maybe think about your preferred airline of choice. And that brings, you know, this needs-based demand to life really quickly. If you can't fly for whatever reason, right, that doesn't detract from your loyalty to a specific airline. Equally, if you think about a specific customer journey within a flight, you know, if we use an international flight as an example here, you expect to cool your heels at an airport for 2 hours before your flight, right? So that is another idle point that, because it is an expected part of the journey, I don't think necessarily negatively impacts your loyalty more broadly. As long, of course, as it's within the expected parameters. If you're sitting there patiently chilling for 12 hours because of a flight delay, that might be a slightly different experience. And so let me give you an example here, maybe of when I travel for work, right? Which is, because I'm 100% a princess, usually, you know, completely carry-on based. So for work, I go with, you know, 1x carry-on suitcase and a laptop. I'm lucky enough to have my assistant book the flights, and that means that your actual booking journey is not that important to me. Your baggage handling is not that important to me. And the implication of that is, if you are an airline and you invested a lot of money in a concierge-like one-stop shop booking system, that would be fantastic, but it is not going to impact my loyalty in any way. That is going to be an overinvestment, actually. Again, with the princess part, I am very much a fan of lying flat in an overnight flight. And so if you decide to cut costs and have one of those strange ski slopey type seats that, you know, go to about a 30-degree angle and no more, that is absolutely going to impact my journey and choice to use you as an airline more frequently. And so the long story short there is that it is less the idle points and more the actual points that matter in your customer journey that builds the memory structures and loyalty that entrenches a user and therefore overcomes that periods of non-use. Coming back to my airplane example here, and this is very top of mind because I'm on a plane in exactly 2 weeks' time, and then I am out of working days for the year, which is wildly exciting. But when I travel for holiday, this becomes a very different experience, right? Then I am a lot more price sensitive. Baggage handling matters a lot more because suddenly those are parts of the journey that I engage with and that sways my decision more broadly. I also have more time, and so connection times are slightly less important. And I think that is a way of just probably demonstrating the importance of data, as you think about your customer journey. Data in identifying what are the points that matter versus what are the points that matter less, and also, what the hygiene factors are versus what's going to shoot the lights out in each of those points. So a plug for using both qual and quantitative data as you map out your journeys and understanding your customer personas. I hope that answered your question, Tim. Let me hand it back over to you.
100%. Thanks, Imke. And what I learned from that as well is that it's probably a great idea to travel with you, because I'm sure anyone who travels with you gets tip-top service and experience from their providers.
I speed walk through airports, so you're going to have to keep up, just as a fair warning there.
I'll do my best. So maybe Kebo, to bring you into the conversation here, in terms of the overall theme around rewards that really resonate. I know that a lot of your research and design that went into the AVBOB member rewards program has been a true testimony to this fact that organizations can really achieve phenomenal business outcomes. That could include things like product signups, product penetration, upsell, cross-sell, referral, and so on, by incentivizing the right customer behaviors with the right rewards at the right time. So what have you discovered through the member value journey regarding those rewards that really resonate with South African consumers?
Yes. Yes, Tim, thanks for that. Yes, and we've had an opportunity to actually work tirelessly on crafting and designing AVBOB member rewards. But before I even go into that, I think it's very important that we give a bit of context that, before we had AVBOB member rewards, the existing member benefits and policy benefits that we had in place for AVBOB members were primarily around, a certain event taking place in our members' life. I would imagine that most of our audience is familiar with the AVBOB brand. So we are in the funeral insurance space. And therefore, as a mutual, when we give back, the value, it was mostly around those policy benefits or member benefits that were, going to be realized at a particular point in time. And that was when that particular event happens, in this particular case, death, which was linked to the policy benefits. And some of the member benefits, like the AVBOB reward account, is at a much later date in the life of our members. On the other hand, that also gave us quite a lot of challenges around, the frequency with which, or the frequency at which we were engaging with our members. So it is important that when we engage with our members throughout their lifetime, not only at that particular point in time. And we needed to make sure that we are also relevant in the day-to-day living of our AVBOB members. And that really required a lot of mindset change, a mindset shift in terms of the way we approached our strategy, to making sure that it is current and at the same time it is relevant. And being a mutual, it presented us with a very fertile ground and a very good opportunity for us to now rethink how we, share this value with our members. We did quite a lot of extensive research, both quantitative and qualitative, taking into account what is happening within the financial services space, in the competing categories, in the complementing categories, and interestingly, in the rewards programs category, which was something that was, ordinarily you would have thought that it was a bit more removed from where we were as a business. Now, looking at all of that and looking at the role that the rewards programs play in the lives of AVBOB members in terms of their day-to-day living, that's where the sweet spot for us was. And in the strategy development crafting the strategy and designing the program, we took the mutual benefits or the core purpose of AFBOB being a mutual of creating and sharing value and bringing it together with this opportunity to create AFBOB member rewards as a vehicle for us to be able to distribute these surplus profits that we generate as a mutual to share value with our members. And that has been quite a phenomenal achievement for us as a business. And it has actually allowed us to even gain more insights in terms of the daily living and the daily lives of our members. It's still early days, but just to call out some numbers, we are 7 months into the launch of the program, and we have been able to, from a penetration perspective, we are now sitting at 15% of penetration of the AFBOB member base. And the member base that we are looking at is 1.8 million members for AFBOB. So 15% in 7 months for a rewards or a loyalty program is quite phenomenal. But at the same time, it has also allowed us to increase that frequency of engagement with our members and actually drive more meaningful experiences through this program. Currently, if we look at our self-service portal that we had before the launch of this program, within the 7 months, we've been able to double the engagement that our members have actually had with AFBOB, and actually having more members, registering on our self-service portal to increase that level of engagement with our members. So that's where we are, and we are still evolving and we are still learning. But I think so far, ultimately, us being able to reach that goal, to deliver value back to the hands of the AFBOB members in their day-to-day living, not while they are still alive, not at a specific point in time. And I think, then those journey points also then become redefined, because there's a completely different approach in the way we view our approach in terms of how we engage with our members and the customer experiences that we create in the process as well.
Excellent. Kebo, thanks for sharing that. It's such an amazing story, and I know that you often like to be very modest about the achievements that you and your team have already got traction on in the market. But 15% penetration, that's significantly higher than a lot of players in the financial services space. And what I like is that the sheer impact that you're having, that's hundreds of thousands of lives that we're talking about. And the response that you're getting from the market and the value that you're creating really does speak for itself. So just as a quick note to the audience, we are going to be taking some audience questions in just a moment. So please, will you use the chat room function? If you have any questions for Imka, for Kebo, for Trent, or even for myself, we'll be happy to answer those questions in a few minutes. And also feel free to use your react emojis. If you hear something that really resonates with you, give us a thumbs up, give us a smile or a heart. And we love to keep this engaging. And of course, we'll share the recording with you and your teams after the session. So Trent, I'd like to come over to you. And, something that I know that you're quite passionate about is this concept of influencing behavior. And sometimes positive behavior change requires just a subtle shift in environment. And it actually came from a Nobel laureate author, a man by the name of Richard Thaler. He wrote a book called Nudge. And this concept of a nudge is known to be just a small feature within the environment that attracts our attention and alters our behavior. So maybe just a question for you. What can organizations do better to nudge consumer behavior, and how does this become even easier or more difficult in this new age of digitalization and artificial intelligence?
So I think, Tim, if we reflect on the two perspectives of Imka and Kebo, they came at the problem or the perspective of the discussion from 2 points of view. Imka was very specific about her individual experience in running in an airline. But as Kebo reflected, she reflected on 15% of members within AFBOB being engaged. And I think that sort of reflects on the collective challenge we have in driving customer behavior. To get customers to interact, you have to appeal to the individual. And to appeal to the individual, the engagement and the nudges, as you put it, have to be relevant and they have to be personalized to the individual. Now, in the old days of traditional rules, that was quite difficult to do because to codify rules for each individual was almost an impossible task. And AI has really brought us into a world where we can take data and we can mass personalize at scale. And that really gives us an incredible ability to have a far bigger influence on driving behavior at a very specific level for a particular individual. But what's also important is actually to have context of the individual. So on the one hand, traditional marketing was funnel-based, it was broadcast-orientated, and yes, there was an element of personalization. But if you really want to take that to the next level, what you need to do is you need to understand the context of a customer. And nudging is great when there's inaction and things are not progressing along the customer journey as as is required. And as we all know, people are busy attending webinars and doing other important pieces of work in their lives. And often they get distracted and not able to complete that FICA application or submit the necessary documentation for the credit check. And often you have to nudge them along. But at the same time, you've got other customers that are in fact moving along the journey and they don't need to be nudged. And the last thing you want to be doing is you don't want to be engaging with them. So how does it all come together? It comes together on the basis that communications should be personalized. They should be personalized based on the context of the individual. They should understand where the customer is on the journey. They should understand if the customer is in fact moving forward or if they've stalled. And the communications then have to echo the value that Kebo very much spoke about is what is of value to a customer. Imco was very clear on terms of her different contexts and one individual actually having two demands of values in two different contexts, whether she's in business travel or whether she's in individual travel. So really to do this right and to do it at scale, ultimately you do need technology to pull all the concepts together, and nudges are super, super powerful. It's that fine balance of making sure that you're making customers move forward while on the one hand not being creepy and on the other hand not being annoying.
Excellent, Trent. Thanks so much. It also speaks to, how can organizations use data in a meaningful way, just to enrich the customer experience rather than to, feel as if your information is being harvested and sold to third parties. It's all about the experience at the end of the day. So we have time for just a couple more questions, and then we're going to go over to some rapid fire audience questions. Imka, I'd like to come over to you, and something that I've certainly noticed is this fascination with the shift in consumer patterns towards instant gratification. And obviously that's come about through the rise of e-commerce and on-demand delivery. Companies like Checkers 6060 and the like, making it easy enough to get a week's worth of groceries and all the mini figurines for children to fight over within the hour. And a question for you is, how do you perceive the balance that organizations need to strike between providing that instantaneous recognition and then on the other hand, more fulfilling long-term goals? What's your view on that?
Hopefully not a wildly contentious one, but I am very much for not rewarding instant gratification. And if you think about the marketing funnel, in buying a new car, for example, their instant gratification would be at the point where you drive that car off the showroom floor. So in other words, you are buying a sale, right? You are incentivizing people for purchasing the sale, and therefore you are in very much margin eroding territory. My perspective is very much one of the 2 points where you do want to invest in that funnel journey would be at the lifetime value point of view, so repeat purchase. So in other words, it is time for me to buy a new car. That is a great point to start engaging. Or at the, I am thinking about a car, maybe this car, not sure, that consideration point. And there the investment is not one around value eroding, it is around equity building, right? And so how do you invest in really building a customer experience of your product to convince them to buy? And so I am, as I said, really not a big fan of the short-term incentivization. It is very much more around building the longer term. I do think there is an interesting moment in that short term, that first moment of purchase, though, where you can think about how to elevate that moment to make it a reward in and of itself, right? And so back to my car example, how do I make that moment of driving this car off the showroom floor a big viral moment that I want to talk about, that I want to share with my friends, which again helps you with consideration for the rest of your users as well. In the interest of time, I'm going to stop on this bleating. My husband's in the car industry, so he gets a lot of this from me. So let me park it there and hand back over to you.
Thanks, Imke. Look, I think what I like about that is you're talking about moments that matter. The things that really matter to customers in of themselves can become a reward. And if you're able to accentuate and dial up those moments that matter, what I find is that you end up achieving a higher level of advocacy, which ends up having its own positive benefit, both to the customer, to their networks, and of course to the organization. So, Kebo, something I'm interested to hear your views on here is, clearly South African consumers carry this strong sense of community involvement, certainly when it comes to purchase decisions and loyalty that they might have with an organization. But from your perspective, could you share some of your views on tapping into that community affinity within the South African consumer base?
Well, it's very interesting one, Tim, because, as South Africans, we have very strong family ties. And, and at the center of that, let's think about AFBOB. It is the backbone of AFBOB, really is the funeral insurance. So AFBOB is known to be a funeral brand. And, coming back to the social, I liked, and I'm going to reference trends as a point around socio-cultural environment. Taking that socio-cultural environment that trend referred to, we as South Africans like to give our departed loved ones dignified send-off, right? But at the same time, and this is a contradiction, conducting a funeral in terms of cost to the family of the departed loved one is a grudge purchase. So it's really competing, because on one hand, there's the functional benefit that a departed or the family would need, but then there's this emotive part as well in terms of the South African, the deep family ties that we have. So it's very important, and it's critical for us to define this strong sense of community in terms of belonging into who we are and in everything that we do. Interestingly, now coming back to AFBOB, the concept of a mutual is not well understood, and that on its own again is somehow a contradiction. So we had in this process of crafting AFBOB member rewards program, it was quite a critical point that we needed to make sure that we demonstrate the value of belonging to a mutual, because AFBOB is anchored on those core South African family values that we all subscribe to. And we needed to now rethink, how do we demonstrate and bring that to life? And making sure that we are able to bring the mutual values of family mutual values together with the socio-cultural context that we are operating in. And by that, I mean family from a sharing of this mutual value that we've already spoken about. So I think also what the program has enabled us to do is being able to cross that barrier and extend the brand beyond just funeral service or funeral business, but allowed us to now go into other categories or adjacent categories through this program. And also it has created this sense of community, because now all of a sudden somebody understands, what does it mean for me as an individual to be a member of AFBOB, a member of a mutual, a member of this broader community that is existing within the South African context. So I think that has been quite insightful, but at the same time, it has been very insightful. And I will say that maybe we did underestimate our members to a certain degree, but underestimating their resilience and their affinity and loyalty to the Afro brand, the fact that they're able to extend it beyond what we have always known it to be.
Excellent, Kebo. I think it really does speak to the uniqueness of the South African consumer base and the importance for us to drive, how we give back in a meaningful way to communities and really delivering on what it is that they are looking for. So I've received a message for a question for Trent that I'd like to put forward here. And a question like this was bound to come up, given that we are in the age of AI. But the question here reads, for Trent, where does artificial intelligence fit into all of this? As customer service companies like Zendesk predict, artificial intelligence will play a role in up to 100% of customer service interactions in the future. Any thoughts on AI in this whole world of customer behavior, Trent?
So I think, Tim, at the end of the day, AI, yes, it's going to change the world, but in this context, it's a tool. And the tool manifests itself so far as the fact that the objective that we've spoken about is really around driving customer behavior. So the question is, how do you use a tool to drive customer behavior? Now, to get people to change behavior, as we've discussed already, you have to appeal to their emotional side. And you have to actually trigger emotions in a way, and I think this is strongly echoed by what Kebo's just said about culture and community. So if you start looking at culture and community, the question is, how can AI get an appeal to the emotions of an individual? And humans, as we interact with the world, we have a natural ego, and that natural ego likes to think that we are unique and special. And certainly, if you start talking to people about their particular context, just a really silly example, but Tim, I think I'm going to have a much better conversation talking to, for instance, Kebo around the necklace that she's wearing today, as opposed to talking to you about your necklace, because this wouldn't be an appropriate fit. So you need to make sure that conversations are relevant to the individual. And part of what AI is really good at is it can bring those worlds together. It can recognize the specifics of the individual. It can take the data on board, and it can do a pretty good job, well, I'd argue an excellent job, of making sure that content is relevant to the individual. And, great marketing is ultimately making sure that there's both a perceived value in the message and that the message is relevant to the individual. And it can be, super, super powerful in that regard.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you, Trent. And I guess you can't really see my beautiful necklace today, but I do imagine that nature of conversation would be more relevant with Kebo. And of course, you do need to tap into the relevance of, I often say you need to get to the right customer with the right message at the right time through the right channel. And 100%. If you miss out on that, there's a good chance that you're not going to get the response that you're looking for. So we are running towards the closing part of our session, and if there are any further audience questions, please feel free to ask them. In the meantime, I'd like to ask for a quick closing statement. This is going to be a little bit of a rapid fire response from each of our participants. And the way I'm going to frame it is to say, imagine you had a crystal ball, but you could only see into that crystal ball for 10 seconds or less. And what I'm hoping you can share with our audience in 10 seconds or less is, what are your predictions from this crystal ball on how the evolution of technology and custom experience capabilities will allow us to better serve the customer and their needs in the future? Imke, maybe if we could start with you, what is your crystal ball vision for the future here?
10 seconds is a short one here. I think customers are going to be a lot less patient and forgiving, and as a result, it is going to be up to us to use tech to streamline and serve in a much faster and compelling way, and also up to us to resist bolting on tech for the sake of bolting on tech, just to have, the latest bell and whistle. But that's what my crystal ball says.
I like it. Yeah, it speaks to, using fit for purpose technology to solve the impatience of our customer base. Kebo, I'd like to ask the same of you. What are your thoughts on the future in this space?
So I'm going to say, in the world of mass brains, and I think it's very important because, with mass brains, it's not all the same shoe fits all. I think for us to strive for that day-to-day relevance, technology is going to be a critical enabler. And I'm going to, especially within the context of personalization and also adaptability. So for me, that's going to be essentially the critical one that we need to make sure that we get right. And I also would like just to reference, in one of Trent's slides around magnetism, those connections, those meaningful connections, for us is that experiential and economic, bringing those two together to live together in the day-to-day lives of our customers.
I love that. That view on the day-to-day becomes so important. You need to meet the customer on their own terms, not to, define terms that are convenient for the organization. And that concept of magnetism, how do you bring together value through the connection that you create with the customer? Trent, last one over to you. Let's shoot on your views for what the future might hold in this space.
I'm going to put out a hope as well as hopefully a prediction as well. My hope and prediction is that my social media feeds are filled with relevant information, so there's a lot less of it. My inbox is more empty. I get less spam. I get less SMS that's irrelevant to me, and that I'm getting great offers for products and brands that I want, and that I'm getting some fantastic WhatsApps that are keeping me engaged and compelling. I think there's just so much wastage in marketing at the moment, and it's just so irrelevant to people. It's time wasting. It's bad for the organization. It's bad for the individual. So I see a world where we really get to the point of matching need with engagement, which is a better world for the consumer, and it's hopefully a better world for the organizations that are spending money on that marketing.
Trent, that one sounds like music to my ears. There's a lot of noise out there on different channels, and there are more and more channels, more and more content that is being created all the time. I know that there's a terrifying stat around the amount of data that is created every year, not just surpasses the previous year, but sometimes up to tenfold increases on the data that has been created, and that's across a variety of different channels. On the topic of a lot of noise out there, it's important that we're having these really robust discussions on topics like how we navigate the future of drawing out consumer insight to create a better value proposition. And because of that, I'd like to thank everyone who dialed in to join us today. If you can spread the word, pass on a positive message as a result of this webinar, to us, that is success. And we're glad that we can share some of the insights from our panelists. To Imka, to Kebo, to Trent, and the rest of the team helping out in the background. Really appreciate your time, your perspectives, and sharing a positive message. And we look forward to hosting more sessions of this nature in the future. We've recorded this session, so we'll be sharing that with you. Please follow the inQuba page and the Cadena Growth Partners page over on LinkedIn. And you can also connect with our fantastic speakers who shared their insights with us today. From my side, thank you so much, and we look forward to engaging with you again. Have a great week further.
Thanks so much, Tim.